Program, Congressman Ron Paul, who, of course, is running for president, and according to the numbers that I've seen, is holding firm in about third position. Hey, Congressman, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be with you.
React, if you would, to the issue of the day, which is this tragic passing of Steve Jobs. Is Ron Paul a Mac person?
Well, I'm not too much into that. I don't have an Apple or what, but he, as far as I'm concerned, is a great example of what you can do when you're a real entrepreneur. So it was rather sad to see his early death, but he certainly is a hero to many people who believe in the market system of economics.
I take note of the fact that he passed just at a moment when this Occupy Wall Street movement is taking hold. I'm in Boston today. Boston is one of the locales around the country where people are coming out in increasing numbers, speaking for the so-called 99%. Well, here's a guy who's being mourned today who was a member of the 1% Club. And I guess what I'm saying is obvious, that the 1% Club's not all that bad. We rely on the 1%ers for entrepreneurship.
No, and I think you make an important point, because some people are just slashing out at people who have wealth, and I think that's very dangerous, because some people are just envious of others. I think it's the way people get wealth that you have to look at. Steve Jobs is a good example of providing a product, and he was voted his wealth by the consumer who liked his products, and he became wealthy. But most of that money, went back into doing more things, developing more items for the people, and providing a lot of jobs. But there's a lot of people in this country who have gotten wealthy and actually ended up getting bailed out with taxpayers' money. So I think there's a legitimate concern about wealth being gained through benefits from government, benefits and contracts and subsidies. So there's quite a bit of difference. And what I'm afraid of right now is this striking out and saying anybody who has wealth are bad people. That could be very harmful.
Mitt Romney says this is dangerous class warfare. Newt says this is a sad commentary on Obama's leadership. Herman Cain, a third of your competitors, said this: don't blame Wall Street, don't blame the big banks. If you don't have a job and you're not rich, blame yourself. That sounds pretty harsh. You don't buy into Herman Cain?
I don't, because actually I use some of the rhetoric, but I try to explain it like I just did, that there is a difference, because I come down pretty hard on Wall Street and the banks, because they're the ones who were too big to fail, and they're the ones who made a lot of money when the bubble was being blown up, and they profited. And then they got involved in derivatives, and they went broke. Instead of going bankrupt and needing to start all over again, we saved them by the taxpayer then, either through the Congress or through the Federal Reserve, financing these people, and these bad assets were dumped on the people. So, no, I blame the system in many ways, the Federal Reserve system, too much mischief by the Congress, too much taxes, too much regulation, and too many people in the middle class get wiped out. A characteristic of the destruction of a currency is that the middle class usually gets wiped out, and the wealth is transferred from the poor and the middle class to the wealthy. And I think this is a perfect example of how the wealthy made money with the bubble, which was an artificial creature by the Federal Reserve. At the same time, they got the bailout. To me, that's different than talking about Steve Jobs and being envious of his wealth.
Congressman, you made a lot of news a couple of days ago relative to the takeout of Anwar al-Awlaki. In a perfect world, I too would have liked to have seen the man put on trial, but where it becomes impractical, wouldn't you rather that he be taken out than continue to incite violence against Americans?
Well, not really. And if you did go with that, I would hope that you would endorse the idea that we know what the rules are. How does your name get placed on this list? Who does it? What kind of crimes did they commit? Can we have even a trial in absentia? But this idea that names just pop up and are on a list, this is very, very dangerous.
Would you apply that same standard to the takedown of bin Laden?
Bin Laden, I think we could argue somewhat differently, because bin Laden was closely associated with 9/11. I voted for that authority to go after him. The tragedy there is we went into nation building and forgot about him for 10 years. So that process was very, very poor. But no, that's a little bit different than, because that was actually some given authority for those individuals directly responsible for 9/11. al-Awlaki, we don't even know what crime he committed. He has spoken out. The only thing I can get on individuals who might be placed on lists is that they are a threat to us. Well, people on radio talk shows might be critical of their government. What if the government someday say, you're a threat to us? So doing this secretly and no rule of law. And the one example I've used, I think we should think about, and that's Adolf Eichmann. You know, how could anybody have been more, the world be more confident he was a ruthless Nazi killer? But, you know, Israel took him, you know, captured him and took him over and gave him a trial. We did this with all the Nazi war criminals. So there was a bit of more respect for the rule of law, and it took a lot of years, hundreds and hundreds of years, to develop this concept that you can't take life without the rule of law and without a process. So I think it's a dangerous step. And,
okay, well, again, in a perfect world, I would like SEAL Team 6 to have snatched him off the streets or from the desert of Yemen and bring him home for a trial. But if you can't do that, I'd much sooner have him 6 feet under than still creating internet videos that bring out the likes of Major Nadal Hassan to kill 13 people at Fort Hood.
Yeah, but I don't think you can blame him for that. He might be inciting, and that is true, but that means language is insightful, and where do you draw the line? I mean, I say a lot of things that people might say, oh, he's insightful. He's always criticizing the Fed, you know, and things like this, and he's criticizing the government. I don't think that line should ever be blurred, and I just don't think that anybody was hiding in their cupboards that al-Awlaki was going to see to it that this country was, you know, security was going to be threatened.
Congressman, before I let you go, I'm in Massachusetts today, right next door to a state very important to Ron Paul right now. I think they're going to have a barn burner of a Senate race between Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown in Massachusetts. She's got to get the nod. But I have 60 seconds worth of audio I would love to play for you. It's Elizabeth Warren on the stump talking about how no one in this country, according to her, got rich on their own. It's an internet sensation, and if you'll permit me, I'll play it, and then I'll give Ron Paul the floor.
I'm anxious to hear it.
There is nobody in this country who got rich on his own. Nobody. You built a factory out there, good for you, but I want to be clear. You moved your goods to market on the roads the rest of us paid for. Yep. You hired workers the rest of us paid to educate. You were safe in your factory because of police forces and fire forces that the rest of us paid for. You didn't have to worry that marauding bands would come and seize everything at your factory and hire someone to protect against this because of the work the rest of us did. Now look, you built a factory and it turned into something terrific or a great idea. God bless. Keep a big hunk of it. But part of the underlying social contract is you take a hunk of that and pay forward for the next kid who comes along.
And Congressman George Will today in the Washington Post responds to that. But I'd love to hear, what does Ron Paul think when he hears her voice and those sentiments?
Unfortunately, it's a reflection of an educational system that we've had for a long time, and it's class warfare, and she's demagoguing the issue. She doesn't understand the marketplace. These ideas are very, very dangerous, but these ideas are allowed in our society. The only way we can combat somebody like this is with a better idea, but we're up against it because many people have been conditioned this way. And I think the basic flaw in our system has been that the government is responsible for redistributing wealth, and entitlements are rights, and it's quite a bit different than a right to your life and your liberty and a right to keep what you earn. But to say that nobody's responsible for their successes, I cannot imagine that we're that far down the trail toward a dictatorship.
My father raised my brother and me to believe that you got to pay your dues. I imagine you raised Rand in the same way. Isn't Elizabeth Warren saying in a different way, you got to pay your dues? You know, you owe the community something, and I don't mean the vast majority of your wealth, but you got to recognize that you became successful in this context that we all contributed toward.
Well, I don't think you can apply that, say, to a Steve Jobs. I mean, he had his obligation to satisfy himself by doing a good job, is satisfy to his company to create job satisfaction by creating great products. But he didn't have an obligation to sacrifice himself and say that he owed the community. Who's the community? I mean, who's going to speak for the community? I think it's impossible, and that's the whole thing. The community is everybody and nobody, and whoever's in power speaks for the community. Then they want to dictate us every single thing about what we want to do with our life and our wealth.
I always appreciate dialogue with you, and I want to honor my time commitment so that Ron Paul comes back to the program again and again.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be with you.
All right, Congressman, I appreciate your time. By all means, weigh in. I've been dying to play that for Ron.